Okay, so for today, we're going to do chapter 3, which is on integrative negotiating. So we did distributive on Tuesday, so now we're going to talk about integrative, and that is, remember, the win-win-win. How can we make a deal that's going to be good for both parties? So there's some functional differences between distributive negotiation and integrative negotiation. So the first is you focus on what we have in common, and if you're doing business with a vendor, what happens if you're a vendor and I'm supplying goods to a customer? What happens if that customer fails in their business? You lose an account, right? So that's why, do you have, even though you don't work for that company, do you have their best interest in it? Yeah, because you have to have your partners doing well for you to do well. So that's kind of one of the things. You address needs and interests, not positions. Okay, so in exam 3, I'm going to do a whole section on interest, rights, and power. So interest means how do we satisfy what people want, not necessarily positions, which is where we end up at the end of the negotiation. You try to commit the needs of all involved parties. In a distributive negotiation, I'm only worried about me. Exchange information and ideas. For this to work, you've got to be able to share, and so that requires trust. If you're going to have an integrative negotiation, you got to trust the people you're dealing with. You can invent options for mutual gain. You don't need to necessarily stick strictly to what's available out there, and use objective criteria to set standards, objective, so we can measure it. All right, so what are the characteristics we need? Honesty and integrity. You can't have an integrative negotiation if you don't trust the other party. And I will tell you, not a lot of specifics, but when I sold my business, I owned a franchise, owned 3 franchise restaurants. I sold to another franchisee. That makes sense. It's the cleanest way to sell a franchise because they're already approved. They don't have to get approval from the franchisor. Plus, they already know the business. So this guy, I've known him for 4 years. We go to franchise meetings together. Starts out really amicable. Things are going really well, and then the guy just starts totally nitpicking me. And so in a heartbeat, the negotiation turned from integrative to distributive. And I hate it for him. I hated it for my people because that's the one thing I wanted was my people taken care of. But the guy was pretty hard-headed, didn't listen, and so you think I helped him after I sold my business to him? Nah, not at all. So 4 years after, 3.5 years after I sold my business, both the stores were closed down. He paid cash, it's okay. I felt bad for my people, but I don't get it why he would have made it a distributive negotiation, because I knew that town. He did not, and I could have helped him, but at that point, I'm out. All right, abundance mentality. Got to look at the big picture. I got to look at helping my customer do good, not just me selling stuff. Maturity, courage to stand up for your issues, but yet still value the other party. Systems orientation, look at the big picture, not just the small stuff. And then you got to have good listening skills because that's where that sharing information comes in. All right, so what else do we have to do? Create a free flow of information. If one person's the only one sharing information, it becomes a disadvantage to the other party. Got to understand the other party. Why do they want? Why are they asking for what they're asking for? And that can give you a lot into why they're asking for it. Emphasize the commonalities instead of the differences, and search for solutions that are going to be positive for both parties. Okay? Key steps: identify and define the problem, understand it fully, interested needs in both sides, come up with alternatives, and then come up with your alternative. And that's one of the things I teach the Managing Growth class, and I have a couple of papers I have students write, and it's a critical thinking process. That is, okay, what are all the options we have? What are the positives and negatives of each option? And then out of that, once you do that analysis, pick the best option. And one of the things I will tell you guys, in the job fairs coming up, one of the comments that a lot of recruiters tell me that's lacking in your class coming out are critical thinking skills. And it makes sense. When you're in a classroom of 70, 80, 200 people, how many critical thinking writing assignments are you going to get? Not many, because teachers don't want to grade that much stuff. So sometimes I maybe don't do a good job of teaching you to critically think. That's kind of your model. What are my alternatives? What are the positives and negatives of each alternative? And then if I go through that analysis, it should help me make the best choice. All right, and you don't need to worry about that slide. All right, so identify and define the problem. It's got to be mutually acceptable to both sides, and that's a challenge sometimes because people's interests are going to be a little bit different. State it with an eye towards practicality. State the problem and goal and identify the obstacles. Very important, number 4, depersonalize. What do we mean by depersonalize? Is that possible all the time? Why do we want to depersonalize business?
And that's when you go from integrative to distributive.
Yeah, we'll turn into a distributive.
And sometimes, like, personal problems start, like, attacking, like, oh, but you dated my sister, so I don't like.
Yeah, and it's why, have you guys ever been told not to do business with family and friends? Mm-hmm. Why is that? You can't, okay, I'm a parent. Can I be objective about my children? Yeah, maybe somewhat, but at some point, not really. And so you want to take your emotions out of this and you want to deal with facts. And it's a challenge, and that's why some of the worst deals that I've been involved in were family and friends, just because you trust them. And there's also a built-in trust, and can you trust all your family and friends? Yeah, no, they're people. And I think sometimes that you get lulled into a sense of maybe not doing all the due diligence. I know I got burned one time. I didn't do the due diligence. It's my fault. But I didn't do it because I trusted what the other person was telling me because they were a friend of mine. So take friendship out of it. Even if you're dealing with friends, go through the process. Check the financial records. Get it in writing. Do everything by the book that you would do if you didn't know that person at all. And I promise that's some good advice. Okay, separate the problem definition for the search for the solution. All right, so there's 4 different types of interests we're going to talk about. The first are substantive interests, those that are related to the key issue of the negotiation. So every negotiation is going to have substantive. If you're dealing with a product, then price is going to be a substantive issue. That's all the time. Process interests are related to the way a dispute is settled. There's times when things may not turn out your way, but as long as you were treated fairly in the process, you walk away okay because you don't feel like you were violated in any way. The process, I got my shot. You're bidding on some business, and the vendor, your customer calls in 3 different vendors to make a proposal, and you don't get the business, but you felt like the process was fair. I got a shot. It's better than not even getting to make your proposal. And I went into a competitive bid one time. This was the worst, and this was before I really even thought about negotiating. But one of our big customers, a guy came into them and said, I can save you 10% off all your purchasing. And okay, this is a multi-million-dollar company, so is 10% a good amount of money? Yeah, absolutely. And so here was the guy's game plan. He sent a letter to all the vendors and said, we're going to have a meeting, you're going to pitch yourself, and then you're going to submit your offer to the company. So we get in there, have a nice PowerPoint done to show our skills, and we're like the lead carrier for this company. We didn't even get a chance to get the projector set up. The guy says, I don't want to see any dog and pony show, just give me your best offer. So he was basically just going in and lowballing all the vendors. I mean, there were people walking out of there crying, just going, I can't do that price. And that's not a good, is that a good way to treat your vendors? Nah. Do you want to be partners with your vendors? Yeah. Because what happens if he drives those people out of business? Okay, now all of a sudden I don't have a vendor. So treat people the way you want to be treated. And, I want to make the most money. I always wanted to make the most money I could. But I also think if you treat people fairly and take care of your vendors, there's more to that than just totally always getting the best deal and just really screwing your vendors. I don't think there's value to that. Relations interests indicate that one or both parties value the relationship. If I care about my customers or care about my vendors over long term, we're going to have a relationship. And that's part of it. And any of you guys that are like salespeople, who do people do business with? Who do you guys do business with? People you like. Okay, so most salespeople, sure, it's about a product, and sure, it's about a service, but are there most products or services that you can find 2 or 3 that are pretty equal? So why do people choose you over other people? Hopefully, that's it. Sales is about relationships. So establish those relationships. Oh, by the way, that guy that I was telling you about, the low ball, that we had to do the low ball offer, we were not the lowest bid, but because my sales rep, who was a 20-year sales rep and grew up in that community, knew the higher-ups and had been with that company, working with them for like 15, 16 years, we kept our business at the same price. Did not lose a step. Because the big people in Atlanta that he knew called the people in Wetumpka, Alabama, and said, "You're not kicking Roadway out." Okay? It was about relationships. Had nothing to do with bid. All right, then the last, interest in principle. Doing what's fair, right, acceptable, ethical, and maybe shared by the parties. Once again, I caution you, though, you are going to deal with people in your lifetime that don't have the same ethical standards that you do. When you are in that situation, you're going to be at a disadvantage. If you have high ethics and they don't, you just got to guard yourself. All right, so observations on interest. There's always more than one, and generally, sometimes the person you're dealing with, their interests are going to be different than yours. They often stem from deeply rooted human needs or values. You guys, most of your needs, interests, are based on how you're raised and things that have happened in your life. Do your interests change over time? Yeah, certain things are going to occur in your life that are going to totally change what your values are and your interests are. That's something to be aware of also. Can change. Numerous ways to surface interest, and then surfacing interest is not always easy or to one's best advantage. All right, and then notes down there, you don't really need to worry about those on that page. All right, so there's 4 approaches. It's called position accommodation. Parties receive a portion of their initial demand. That's pretty prevalent. Most time, you're not going to get 100% of what you want. That's why there's a negotiation. So it becomes a position accommodation. Position achievements, parties get exactly what they want. Most times, you're not going to get your initial demand. If you're getting your initial demand a lot, I would tell you you're not asking enough. All right? I want to get turned down some. Because if I'm getting all I'm asking for, first thing that goes through my mind is I didn't ask enough. And I don't know if I told you, I had a neighbor that had put a sign up in his yard and sold his house in 2 days, and the first thing that went through my head was he should have asked more. Now, I don't know that. That could have been the max that somebody would have paid for that house. But if you get your first offer within 2 days, what's that say about the market that person viewed that as a bargain? It would be my opinion. Interest achievement. The underlying interests are completely met. Once again, not going to get everything you want. And then number 4 is more prevalent. Interest substitution. Interest may have to be modified or changed. And that comes to that whole compromise thing we're talking about. We're not going to get everything we want. So both parties are going to have to give to get where we want to be. All right, so we're going to invent options by redefining the problem set. And so we'll go over these individually. All right, so compromise is a position accommodation. I'm not going to get all I want. So that's it's not a good integrative strategy unless both parties are so entrenched in their own position, there's no way to solve the problem. And then for you to do that, you're going to have to feel like that other party's giving as much as you are. Okay, you've both got to give up. You're not going to give up a bunch and have them give up nothing. So that's where compromise comes in. Log roll is a position accommodation. Parties find more than one issue, and you don't, for example, you don't need to know that compromise is a position accommodation. That's a little nitpicky, but you need to know these definitions. All right, log roll. Parties find more than one issue in conflict and prioritize them. They trade in getting their most preferred outcome. So that would be like there's 6 major issues. So I would say, okay, pick one, and then I'll pick one, you pick one, I pick one, and so that's called log rolling. Modifying the resource pie, add new services, okay? So your vendor, they're happy with you and everything, but now you go, well, how about instead of you having to come pick it up, we'll deliver. That would be adding a new service. So that's modifying the resource pie. Expand the pie, add more resources. Now instead of just doing one item, we're going to do your copy paper, your ink, toner, and all your office supplies. Okay, we're going to add. Find a bridge solution. And that says you invent new options to meet all the respective needs so a bridge is created. So that's something that's totally new that we're creating. It's called a bridge because we're creating something new, and that bridge is something that's going to close the gap between us. And then maybe in the roadway situation, us going to that, I think I mentioned that blue ribbon service where we negotiated a price and we guaranteed day service. That would have been a bridge solution because at the time, their only option would have been air freight. So this is something that, hey, you've got a problem, let's invent something new. You don't have to use air freight, but I'll guarantee I can get it there in 2 days. So that would be a bridge solution. Cut the cost for appliance as you minimize the other party's cost for agreeing. It can be administrative cost, delivery, etc. Non-specific compensation, allow one party to obtain their objectives and accommodate the other party for accommodating his interest. In the story that's in the book, they were trying to decide, one of the person lived in the suburbs, one lived outside of the city. They were trying to figure out where to put the office. So non-specific compensation would be, excuse me, if they put the office in the city, then the lady that lived outside would have got all new furniture. So she was given something else to satisfy her. And then superior ordination just says that differences and conflicts are replaced by other interests. And in the story in the book, the one lady just said, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to work there anymore. So that would be superior ordination, where you just replace it by other interests. Go to work doing something else. All right, so brainstorming. And one very important thing, brainstorming is not a problem-solving tool. What is brainstorming? What's the purpose of brainstorming? Ideas. Okay, so it's step one in a problem-solving tool. But brainstorming itself is not a problem-solving tool. It is the first step. What are all the possible alternatives? Okay, give me one, and we'll write those down. You don't want to judge. You want to be impersonal. You want to be sporadic and just don't criticize. You don't want no bad answers. And also go outside. Use as many resources as you can. All right, so narrow the range of solutions or options. So this is kind of once we get brainstorm and we have all these options up there, then we're going to narrow it down. So that's part of the solution process. So we're going to evaluate the solutions on 3 things: quality, objective standards, and acceptability. So quality, first and foremost, is it at the minimum level? You guys always buy the highest quality things? Why not? Don't we want the best quality? They're too expensive sometimes. So, but do we buy the cheapest all the time? No. So the word quality means level of aspiration, the minimum level of aspiration that you need met. So that's actually value. So that's what we try to buy, value. Not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but what's the best bang for our buck? So we do it on quality, objective standards. They got to be measurable, and then acceptability. Will this actually work? So we agreed to the evaluation criteria in advance, so you put that in writing. Justify your personal preferences. We'll always watch the intangibles, and especially when people are agents or representing other people, there's intangibles involved. What's an intangible for an agent? Tangible would be the price of the deal they get, right? But what's the big intangible for agents? Yeah. Reputation, bragging rights, exactly. I got the best deals. Okay, so that's like kind of the side byproduct that agent gets. So a lot of times, and we'll talk about it I think it's in the ethics chapter, that agents can be kind of unscrupulous sometimes, and they'll blame it on the fact that it's not me, I'm just representing the best interest of my client. And use subgroups to evaluate complex opinions. So saying if there's experts outside, maybe get an outside pair of eyes to look at it. All right, so also take time to cool off, look at different ways to log roll. So you look at my notes, I have 3 things that kind of need to think about in every deal. Difference in risk preferences. At your age, should you guys be more or less risk averse now? More. Why? Yeah, you got no downside. I mean, what happens if you fail? Start back over. Okay. What about me?
Risky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the end of the deal. I'm very risk averse right now. And I look back and thinking, I don't know if I told you the actual numbers, but when I opened my second restaurant, I was $1.1 million in debt. And I think about that today and go, what the hell was I thinking? And I was, at the time, 34, 35, and had 2 kids. Yeah.
So you opened up a second restaurant?
Yeah, I opened a second 14 months after I opened my first. And I put everything I had into the first, so basically the second was borrowing 100%. So I was $1.1 million in debt.
Is that actually how much it costs to buy a restaurant?
It was cost to me about $750 to build one. $250 for equipment, $250 for the building, and then $250 for the land, buying the land, concrete, curbs, gutters, everything to get ready.
You must have had good credit.
Well, I had about $300,000 liquid, if I remember right. So I was able to pay down a significant part of the first one, and then my first year I had was strong enough that the bank was willing to loan me the money, given my track record.
So if we were going to develop our credit now, do you think that would help us out with big loans like that in the future?
No. If you're going to borrow money of that size now, the whole lending climate has changed. And I went to a bank to borrow that money. All right, banks now, what happened to banks in 2005, 2006, 2007? Yeah, they just got absolutely hammered because they were making all these big loans that were very risky. Now, to borrow money from a bank, you got to have money in the bank. I mean, they absolutely are very, very low risk. So that's going to be one of you guys that are true entrepreneurs, one of your challenges now is going to be able to find money. And where are most people having to turn? And you're going to take a class on funding sources. Okay, small stuff, family and friends, that's first, called bootstrapping. But then you're going to have to look for outside sources of capital. And the problem with that is debt is always cheaper than equity. Okay, I mean, I did not want to have to bring in a partner to be able to get that money, because once I pay that debt off, then when I sell the business, it's 100% mine. You bring in equity partners, they're going to want a stake in the business. And if you get to the point where you're doing like venture capital and those guys, they're going to actually want control over your business. And if things aren't going good, they're going to step in, which is not bad. I want a partner that can help me, but you guys being able to go out and borrow, $500,000 from a bank now, probably not going to happen. And unless tied to it is some real estate that they can sell and get a good part of their money back. And that's, like I said, I put down $300 on a $750,000 loan. So I only owed $450 the first one. I was able to knock that down pretty good the first year, and then had to borrow another $750 the second year. So, but I also had two pieces of land and 2 buildings. And real estate is always a good collateral, because worst case, the bank can sell that real estate. Equipment, no value at all. Used restaurant equipment's worth about 10 cents on the dollar. There's not a lot of value in that. Okay, but real estate is a tangible asset. I give you one like in a personal sense. I had a friend a while back that his dad was doing his will, and so that you had 2 kids. So he got them together and said, okay, you get first pick, you get next pick, you get next pick, you get next pick. So they just went through the assets that he had listed on a sheet of paper. Sister got first pick, and then my friend Mark got the next pick, and then Mark got the 3rd pick, and she got the 4th. So they just went through and traded off on picking stuff and went through. So it'd be the same thing if you had a business situation where there's 4 key issues. Do I keep your current people or not? Am I going to keep you on or something? Then you could go and trade off, going, look, okay, if you'll keep my current people, then I'll do this. So it's basically a trade-off situation. All right, so risk preferences. Right now, once again, you guys, good time to maybe take a shot with a startup company. Okay, but hey, one other really important thing too. Risk has value. So if you guys have 2 job offers, and one of them's with a real stable company, and one of them's with kind of startup, and you really like the kind of startup, it's kind of sexy, and you think there's some potential there, I would want to get paid a little bit more, because there's going to be a lack of security. Right? So there should be value to risk. Differences in expectations. And that's why partnerships are so hard. You guys have been in partners challenges? Yeah, I mean, you guys look like you did pretty good, but it's not going to be 100%. And you know from the class, some of these guys were in the class last year that where they started businesses. Partnerships it's a challenge. I mean, and I don't know if I give you my analogy. The greatest partnership in America is called marriage, and it fails 50% of the time. And those are people that supposedly love each other. So think about your odds of having a business partnership. And it's because a lot of these three things. What are the risk preference? What are the expectations? And what are the time preference? Somebody may just want to hit it for 2-3 years and flip it. Somebody else may want to be in it for the long haul. Hard to have partnership if you have differences like that. And I mean, I'm in a couple of situations. You guys will find this later. If you have siblings and, you know, when parents die and they leave assets to you and your brother or you and your sister, and one of you wants to sell and one of you wants to keep, how do you solve it? What if you can't afford to? And that's why, I mean, and I talk about it more in management growth, but it's the same thing. Any partnership, you guys should have a written partnership agreement detailing every possible scenario you can think of and what's going to happen if that scenario happens. And it takes a lot of time to do that, but it will save you a lot of problem in the end if you'll do that. And those three things: risk preference, expectations, time preference. Because people are going to have different expectations, different time, different risk tolerances. Keep decisions tentative and conditional until the final proposal is complete, and then minimize formality, record keeping until the final agreements are closed. You don't want to lock in something until everybody's on, we're at the end and everybody's on the same page. All right, factors that affect a successful integrative negotiation. You got to have something in common, and that is, you know, my vendors with me, they needed me to do well, so I would keep buying from them. They had a common goal. I hope to see me do well. Faith in one's own problem-solving ability. Once again, why ownership is better than hiring a manager, because owners are going to work harder at it. A belief in the validity of one's own position and the other's perspective, and then the motivation and commitment to work together. And once again, that things change over time, guys. You can go in with some of your best friends and start this business, but things happen in people's life, and all of a sudden they're not as committed anymore because they got a family, or a loved one gets sick, and so they need to move. And there's a lot of reasons not to do the partnership. All right, so there's goals that there's different types of goals. And we're going to define a common goal as one that all parties share equally, but they do not benefit unless they work together. And so my example, a town government and a factory debate the tax rate, but the common goal is to keep the factory open. So what happens if the factory closes? How does the town get hurt? Tax goes down, tax revenue goes down. And should government be involved in private business at all? So a lot of times these sports owners will want the city to build them a stadium. Does that happen? Miami, yeah. So should the government do that? Okay. Anybody ever seen figures on what an NFL game, the economic value that an NFL game brings to a town? That's millions of dollars, and that's for the weekend, for that game to come in. Good example. I have a couple hundred acres of property in Wakulla County. If the city came in and spent money putting in my roads, okay, they built the roads for me. Okay, I'm a private landowner, and I said, look, I went to the city and said, I will subdivide this property and build houses if you'll build the roads. Should they do that for me? Yeah, so why would it be a good deal for them? In most cases, my initial response is yours. No, why would you pay some guy who owns this property? Why would you build his roads for him? Okay, I can tell you why. My tax bill on that property is about $1,000 a year. If I subdivided that and built 40 houses on that property, what would the tax revenue for the county be? Much more. Okay, I'm paying Greenbelt, which is ag, the lowest tax rate possible. You pay residential tax rate, $2,000 to $3,000 a home times 40 homes, they would get their money back in probably 3 years. Okay, so don't totally dismiss that, but there's also some skepticism that should be used too, because a lot of it is cronyism about people who know and people who are rich getting help. So be skeptical, but I would always not totally discount that because of that reason. There's some stuff that's mutually beneficial to government and individuals. All right, shared goal. Both parties work together, but each benefit differently. Partners in a business work together on a project, but one receives more compensation. I know my wife works for attorneys, and it's kind of like that. You may have a lead attorney. He will pay some of the other attorneys to do some of the groundwork for him, but the lead attorney, the one that signed the case, is going to get a bigger part of the settlement than the people that helped him work on it. So that would be a shared goal. And then a joint goal. Individuals with different personal goals agree to combine them in a collective effort. And that's like a political campaign. There's different factions that all support the same party. They do it for different reasons, but they all work together to get that person elected because the end goal is the same. But those are called common goals, shared goals, and joint goals. And just understand and know the differences between those three. All right, so what else facilitates successful integrative negotiation? First and foremost, trust. You cannot have an integrated negotiation unless you trust the person that you're dealing with. Clear and accurate communication, that comes with trust. If I trust somebody, then I'm going to share information with them. Adam and I were talking this morning, without saying a lot. If you don't trust that person, are you going to be able to work anything? No. And how do you build trust? Is it automatic? It takes time. And with responses that say that yes, you're being fair and yes, you're doing the right thing. And that's another reason why maybe to put some time between some things before you guys jump into something. Do I truly trust this person? You guys and had this conversation with somebody the other day. In a relationship, what's the single most important thing in a relationship? Honesty. To me, trust. If I don't trust somebody, we're not going to have a relationship. And that goes for personal, business, it doesn't matter. If I don't trust you, you guys want to be married or dating somebody you don't trust? The single most important thing. Same thing. Do I want to do business with somebody I can't trust? You guys, any of you guys know people that have had business partners steal money from? People they know, they like, they trust? Yeah. Family members? It happens. So, trust. Clear and accurate communication and an understanding of the dynamics of the integrative negotiation, meaning how can we make this work for both? And that's got to be the end goal. But once again, a lot of integrative negotiations, I always try to start out like that. And sometimes you can't help it. It may turn distributive. And that's why a good negotiator is going to be able to pivot too. You got to understand what's going on and be able to react to that. And my notes, when there's a lack of trust, people tend to focus on claiming value. Okay, if I don't trust you, then I'm going to go after and try to help myself as best I can versus and trying to maximize their own positions. And many times a lack of trust, it forces a distributive negotiation. Because if I don't trust you, I'm not going to share information. If I don't share information, there's no way we can come to a common agreement. All right, so how to gain information when the other party mistrusts you. So the other party doesn't know you, they don't trust you. So share information. If I give information, what's that saying? I'm open. I'm willing to do this for you so we can build trust. Negotiate multiple issues simultaneously. Don't try to just railroad one thing. Going, look, here's 3 options. And options are always a good way to build trust because what you're saying is, I'm open to whichever one of these works best for you. Okay? I don't have one certain way. What happens when people say, well, it's got, I think I mentioned the time I was trying to rent the condo in Salt Lake City, and the guy goes, well, no, you've got to send me the deposit money in advance. And I said, I'll put it in your hand when I get there. Nope, got to send it in advance. Okay, I didn't know that person. I didn't trust them. And there were no options. You're going to do this. Okay, well, boom, relationship's over. I'm not going to start a relationship. And then make multiple offers at the same time. Once again, that builds trust because we can do it this way, we can do it this way. I'm open to any of that. You're not trying to force something. So you can gain information also by evaluating how the other person responds to each of your offers. Right? So once again, a listening process, a thinking process, reading people process, and all. So what's it, so we've been through distributive, we've been through integrative. What's the one thing that to me, other than trust, which I think trust is the single most important, that keeps coming up about what's going to make you a good negotiator? Information, knowledge. The more I know about the situation, the more I know why you're asking for what you're asking. When I shop for houses, the first question I ask anytime I can find the owner, and a lot of times the real estate people, they're really good. They don't want the owners to be anywhere near when the house is being sold. If you guys work with realtors, they want the owners out of the house because owners are emotional. But the first question I like to ask is, why are you selling your house? Why do I want to know that? Okay, and are people that are taking a new job in another town probably in a bigger hurry to sell a house than somebody who's, well, we're retiring, and as soon as I sell my house, we're going to move so-and-so? What's the message you set off with that conversation? But am I in a hurry? Yeah, or how bad you want to move, but I don't have to sell the house. Okay? As soon as I do this, we're going to move. But is that different than, well, my husband's already moved to, Kentucky, and as soon as I sell the house, me and the kids, I got to get up there? That's a difference in urgency. And you guys remember, I loved the whole housing. When the bubble crashed, I was driving down Panacea down that way, and all kinds of signs, because those were all second houses people had down on the water. Make me an offer. Distress sale. Because people were, I heard today too, how many guys from Miami? Miami had the third highest foreclosure rate in the country last year and on housing. And the other two cities, anybody want to take a guess that were higher than Miami? One's easy, Detroit, Cleveland. And Miami was 3. And it was like 7 or 3,000, something like that. It was incredible, large number, because they were talking about the hurricane and the damage that it could do to Miami this weekend. And it says it's already a depressed housing market and things. So, all right. So you have all the information for exam 1. Okay, it's pretty much these 3 slides or maybe one question or something from class discussion, but for the most part, everything's going to come off the slides. Know the definitions. List of 3 are real good questions. Which of these is not? And my notes. Make sure and study my notes. So we've got a week or 2 between, so we're going to play the game next week. And then I think the following week on Tuesday, we're going to debrief. And there's an article we're going to cover. It's called Women Don't Ask. And it's a really good article and it's empirical evidence. A lady that wrote it did a lot of research, and research indicates that women are more reluctant to negotiate than men. So we'll go over her article and then see what you guys kind of think about that. And then Thursday the 29th, there's no class. The job fair, I'm going to open up, and any of you guys that want to attend the job fair, I want you to be able to do that. And then I think the test is the following Tuesday. Don't quote me totally on that. The syllabus is online, but that's what it's at. You have a question?
I remember I asked you about the online sign-up.
Oh, yeah, okay. Guys, our test for this class, if you guys looking online, there is an online section that I'm teaching now. So you guys will be taking the test in class, though. Okay, so you don't sign up, don't take it at the testing center, none of that. It's whatever the date is on the syllabus. You'll come to class. It's Scantron, so make sure and bring pencils and be on time. So it's and whatever the date is on the syllabus. You can do either. The main thing is, if somebody says to you, well, we're going to do this, and the only way I'll do the transaction is you're going to pay me cash. Are you going to trust them? Okay, if you say, well, you can pay me cash, you can send me a check, you can do a money order, okay, there's more trust if you give people options. When people only want one thing, and that's the same thing with some of these charities that are raising money, and I'm real careful. We give a lot of money, but I'm real careful of who I give to. because a lot of the charities, I don't know if you guys know this, a ton of the money goes to administrative costs, and it actually never gets down to help the people. So I try to give to charities that 100% of the money goes to the people, and that's and so there's people that, and it happened back during Katrina, and it happens in any disaster. People will invent organizations, and they'll want like cash or money orders or something. That's a red flag right off the bat. That if they're asking for cash, then that's not necessarily good. They don't want something traceable. Okay. All right, so I think that should be it. If you're A through L, with exception, come to class on Tuesday. M through Z, come to class on Thursday. And then, guys, I'm going to be here unless things get really, really bad. I'm going to be here this weekend. I have a couple of generators, so if you guys need anything, my phone number is on the syllabus. You guys that have parents in South Florida, I hope they're coming this way and not staying down there, but be smart, okay, be safe. Came in late, make sure to let me know.